The office buzzed with its usual Monday chaos. Phones rang incessantly, keyboards clicked in rapid succession, and the faint hum of the air conditioning mingled with the low murmur of hurried conversations. Emily hurried through the corridor, clutching a stack of reports, her heels clicking nervously against the polished floor. Her mind raced with the day's schedule, a client presentation, 2 back-to-back meetings, and the ever-present deadlines that seemed to multiply every morning. In her rush, she barely noticed the clutter of sticky notes, coffee cups, and scattered files around her desk. It wasn't until she reached her chair and felt the smooth surface of her desk that panic struck her like a bolt of lightning. Her diary was gone. The soft leather cover she had always kept tucked safely beneath her laptop was missing. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She scanned the area frantically, her eyes darting under piles of paperwork and behind her computer monitor, but it was nowhere to be found. "Impossible," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her mind spun with a mix of fear and disbelief. Emily had never left anything personal in the open. Her diary wasn't just a book. It was her sanctuary, the repository of her dreams, her insecurities, and the secret confessions she never dared share with anyone. And now it had vanished in the one place she had trusted above all others. Her heartbeat quickened as she thought of the worst-case scenario. Who could have taken it? Her colleagues were all kind enough, but curiosity had a way of turning the innocent into the intrusive. And then a darker thought struck her. The diary wasn't just any personal journal. It was there on her desk, exposed, when Mr. Harrington, the CEO himself, made his morning rounds. A cold knot formed in her stomach. What if he had seen it? What if he read it? Emily's hands shook as she leaned over the desk, half expecting the leather-bound book to appear magically from somewhere hidden. Her pulse pounded, and a heavy weight of dread settled over her chest. She replayed the morning in her mind, trying to remember if she had moved it somewhere else, but everything felt hazy in her rush. The office, once a place of mundane routine, suddenly seemed hostile. Every passing colleague. Emily barely had a moment to catch her breath before she noticed a tall figure approaching down the corridor. Her stomach dropped. It was Mr. Harrington, the CEO, a man whose reputation for perfection was matched only by his piercing gaze. Even from a distance, his presence seemed to command the room, every step deliberate, every movement sharp and controlled. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest, and she instinctively shrank back behind her chair, praying he wouldn't notice the open space where her diary had been. But fate wasn't on her side. The CEO stopped at her desk, his sharp eyes scanning the scattered paperwork. Then, casually, almost absent-mindedly, his gaze fell on the leather-bound diary. Emily's stomach twisted. He picked it up, flipping it over in his hands, feeling the weight of it, the smooth texture of the cover, the faint imprint of her name on the corner. She watched, frozen, as curiosity overtook him. He opened it. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She could see the first page, the delicate handwriting she had thought no one would ever see. Her fingers tightened around her chair, nails digging into the fabric, as she imagined him reading her private thoughts, her dreams, her fears, her secrets. She had always written for herself, never for anyone else. And now, the sanctuary she had built for herself was exposed, vulnerable to judgment she hadn't prepared for. Mr. Harrington flipped through the pages with deliberate slowness, each turn of the paper amplifying the tension in the room. Emily's mind raced. What would he think? Would he see the personal confessions, the doubts about her own abilities, the dreams she had never shared? Would this change how he viewed her professionally? The air felt heavy, every office sound magnified, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the distant ringing phone, the soft footsteps of other employees passing by, yet all she could focus on was the CEO and the diary. Then, he reached the last page. Emily's eyes widened instinctively. The diary's final line, her most intimate secret, was now laid bare. She could feel the invisible weight of the words, as if the air itself had thickened. The CEO froze, the diary suspended in his hands. Time seemed to slow. Emily's pulse raced, sweat prickling at her temples. She had feared this moment for years in her mind, and now it was here, real, unavoidable, and terrifying. And yet, as she watched him, a subtle shift crossed his expression, an unreadable mix of surprise, disbelief, and something she couldn't place. The diary had changed the atmosphere of the office, turning an ordinary day into a fragile, tense standoff between secrecy and revelation. Emily could barely breathe. The office seemed to shrink around her, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows that mirrored the storm inside her. Mr. Harrington stood frozen, diary open in his hands, his sharp eyes scanning the last line over and over as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. The world outside the office faded. There were no phones ringing, no footsteps echoing, no distant chatter of colleagues, only the slow, deliberate rhythm of his breathing and the thundering of her own heart. Her mind raced in a whirlwind of fear and anticipation. Had he read it aloud in his mind? Did he understand it? Was he judging me already? Emily's hands trembled, and she clenched her fists under the desk, wishing desperately that the moment could just rewind itself. But it didn't. Reality pressed in with a suffocating weight. Mr. Harrington's gaze lifted, finally meeting hers. For a brief, terrifying instant, his expression was unreadable. Emily searched for a hint. Anger, ridicule, disappointment, but found nothing concrete. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and intense, yet there was also a strange flicker of something else, something she couldn't name. Her chest tightened as if it might collapse entirely. Emily, he began, his voice low, controlled, yet carrying a subtle undercurrent of disbelief. Every syllable felt heavy, deliberate, as though he was weighing each one before letting it escape. Emily swallowed hard, her throat dry, unsure whether to respond, apologize, or simply vanish from the office entirely. Words seemed impossible. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Time stretched, each second amplified by the tension in the room. Emily's diary, once a private refuge, had transformed into a fragile battlefield of emotion and judgment. She imagined the CEO reading every intimate thought she had ever recorded, the insecurities she had tried to hide, the unspoken dreams she had carefully nurtured, the fears she had locked away from the world. Finally, Mr. Harrington closed the diary slowly, deliberately, almost reverently, and set it down on her desk. Emily's stomach twisted in panic. Was this relief, or a prelude to confrontation? His eyes studied her for a moment longer, intense and unreadable, before he finally spoke again, his tone measured, surprisingly calm. "What you've written. It's very personal," he said, his voice neutral yet somehow carrying weight. "I don't know what I expected to find, but this is honest." Very honest. Emily blinked, unsure whether to feel mortified or relieved. His reaction wasn't mockery, but neither was it entirely predictable. The room felt suspended in uncertainty, every unspoken word between them hanging like fragile glass, ready to shatter at the slightest move. She realized, with a mix of fear and cautious hope, that the diary had changed something, not just how he saw her, but how the entire dynamic of their relationship might shift from this moment onward. The silence in the office was almost deafening. Emily sat frozen at her desk, her diary closed but still trembling slightly under her fingers. Mr. Harrington leaned against the edge of her desk, not in his usual commanding posture, but in a way that suggested contemplation. For the first time, Emily saw a side of him she had never noticed, a pause in the relentless efficiency, a glimpse of humanity beneath the stern exterior. "You didn't think anyone would see this," he said finally, his voice quieter than usual, almost reflective. Emily nodded mutely, the words caught in her throat. How could she explain that the diary was more than paper and ink? It was her heart, her fears, her dreams written in fragile handwriting, never meant for public eyes. He studied her for a long moment, then, surprisingly, smiled faintly, not the polite, distant smile reserved for formal meetings, but a subtle, human expression that made Emily's chest tighten. "But now I have," he added, "and I understand you a little better." Emily's mind raced. Understand her. This was the CEO, someone who had always been distant, almost untouchable. And yet, here he was, holding something deeply personal she had always hidden. She wanted to recoil, to hide the diary again, but something in his calm tone made her hesitate. There was no judgment, no mockery, just a pause, an acknowledgement of honesty and vulnerability. "Your words, they show courage," he continued. "It's not easy to be so open, even with yourself. I respect that." Emily blinked, stunned. Respect. She had expected scolding, embarrassment, perhaps even a reprimand for leaving it on the desk. Not this. The tension in the office slowly began to dissipate, replaced by an uneasy but palpable sense of relief. She exhaled, a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, and allowed a small, shy smile to form. For the first time that day, the office felt less like a battleground and more like a place where trust, honesty, and understanding could exist, even in the most unlikely circumstances. Mr. Harrington straightened, closing the brief moment of intimacy between them with quiet decisiveness. "Just be careful next time," he said lightly, handing the diary back to her. Emily took it, feeling the weight of her own vulnerability and the strange new possibility of connection. As he walked away, Emily realized something important. A private secret, once exposed, could be terrifying, but it could also reveal the humanity in others, even someone as seemingly untouchable as the CEO. The diary had not ruined her. It had changed the day, the dynamic, and perhaps, in some unexpected way, even her life.